And I'm not giving up, I'm not giving up, no, not me. Even if nobody else believes, I'm not going down that easily. So don't give up on me.
Hey everyone, are you rad for Christ? Are you fired up for Jesus? Welcome back to another episode of Radical Christianity, the show that highlights God in action. I'm Drew, your host, and we have some great stuff for you tonight. So, a drag queen walks into a church carrying a Bible and asks, "Can I share a story with you all?" That might sound like the setup for a punchline, but it's actually something very real. A historic Presbyterian church in San Francisco recently hosted a drag queen Bible story hour, where drag performers spoke to audiences that included young children. The event, hosted by Calvary Presbyterian Church, featured LGBT advocate Reverend Jane Spar and performers going by the names Joanne Fabrics, spelled with a triple X, and Flamey Grant. When I see stuff like this, it reminds me that as followers of Christ, it is our duty to address such matters with love, truth, and a heart filled with compassion. First and foremost, let us remember that Jesus taught us to love one another unconditionally, extending grace to those around us. And it is essential that we approach the situation with the same Christ-like love that he demonstrated throughout his ministry. We must not allow judgment or condemnation to cloud our vision, but rather seek to understand the motivation behind such an event. The Reverend Victor Floyd said that his church hosted the event in response to pushback against the drag queen performances around the U.S. Floyd is quoted saying, "We're hoping to offer a little balance to all of the hateful rhetoric that is out there in the country, especially from churches and politicians who are using churches and using trans people and drag queens as their props." I need to point out that he said churches are using churches as props. Talk about a circular rhetoric. What a drag. The Presbyterian Church officially changed its definition of marriage in 2015 to include same-sex couples. Apparently, the church also has encouraged the usage of third-person pronouns for God and has placed a banner that states God, the original they, them, above the church entryway. Yes, the Bible refers to God in the plural, which is no surprise considering the Trinity. Is there anyone else in the Bible that is known as they, them? In the Bible, it typically refers to a plurality of different spirits, both light and dark, like hosts of angels and legions of demons, but who knows? Maybe even aliens. Not sure about the third gender, though. In a world filled with diverse opinions and beliefs, it is not uncommon for different communities to seek ways to connect, to bridge gaps and build understanding. However, as followers of Christ, we must always remain anchored to the timeless truths and principles found in the Bible. As we encounter events like Drag Queen Bible Story Hour, we can exercise discernment and consider the potential implications, remembering that we are called to be in this world, but not of the world, while being cautious not to compromise the message of the gospel in our attempts to connect with different communities. We are the salt and the light, shining God's love and the truth in the midst of the darkness. Let us take this opportunity to reflect on our own churches, our own communities, and evaluate our outreach efforts. Are we actively engaging with those who may feel marginalized or disconnected from God's love? Are we truly reflecting the heart of Jesus in our interactions? These are questions that we need to ask ourselves honestly. As you know, we can't see the rainbow without the rain. As Christians, we are called to love everyone, regardless of their background, beliefs, or lifestyles, being a beacon of hope, extending grace and compassion to those who are hurting or searching for truth. While we may not agree with every approach or event that takes place, we must remember that God's love knows no bounds and can reach even the hardest of hearts. While the news of the Drag Queen Bible Story Hour may be disheartening, let us respond with love and understanding. Let us not shy away from engaging with the world around us, but let us remain rooted in the unchanging truths of the gospel. Remember, laughter is good for the soul, and as the psalmist wrote, a joyful heart is good medicine. Proverbs 17:22. So let us approach these situations with a sense of humor, always holding on to the firm foundation of our faith. And hey, if a Drag Queen Bible Story Hour can inspire a chuckle or two, maybe we can all learn a thing or two about acceptance and the power of laughter. You know, like the time two red blood cells fell in love, but they were two alike, so it was all in vain. Okay, folks, That's enough of that for now. So tell me, are you rad for Christ? Are you fired up for Jesus? All right. Woo! Ladies and gentlemen, we have a great guest for you right now. I can't wait for you to meet this lady. She is super awesome. So please, big, huge, warm welcome for Andrea Gruen. Woo! Thank you so much for coming. Have a seat. So Andrea, welcome to Radical Christianity.
Thanks. It's good to be here.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you're here and that you made it. You are an amazing person. I've known you for a very short time now, and we've prayed together like 2 or 3 times.
You know, there's something about prayer. I have found it to be very powerful. You know, walking this side of heaven, it's a lot. And I think that once I found out that we have a direct connection to the Lord through prayer, to petition the one who holds all authority, who holds all power, that we can come to him and bring our petitions to him, to bring our heart to him, to bring our sorrow to him, to bring our tiredness to him, and that he has this endless well of refreshment, a spring of living water that we long for, and the peace that our souls long for in the midst of the chaos that swirls. Oh, I'm like, hey, let's all go. You know, yeah. I think that's my heart is, let's just link arms and all go. You know?
That's awesome. I probably am not strong on remembering to stop for prayer when I'm like a lot going on, and it's always a good thing to do because it's a good way to just reset. And you know, obviously kind of refocus and, you know, reconnect in the middle of things because I deal with chaos on a regular basis.
Yes.
So you know, so it's something that that I think I know of already. It's not like I learned it fresh.
Yeah.
But interacting with you has been a strong reminder on that. You know, you gotta make time for prayer, even if it seems like it's like there's no time to make.
Well, I feel like, you know, the situations, like you said, you know, when we get older especially, or we're called to anything, right? Like I feel like things are always in motion. There's constant things coming at you, weights, like I said, that we carry, that we bring in our ministry, in our home. I feel like as we gather in the journey, there are weights that we gather on our shoulders. And I don't know, like you said, there's something, that verse that says, be still and know that I'm God. Me and you have heard that verse 10,000 times. And I don't think it was till a couple years ago that I started to learn that there was a still place in the midst of everything. I feel like my world was always determined by what was going on around me, you know? And so to think, and God talked about it. I mean, I've been reading the Bible since I was 9 years old, heard scripture, but I think when God starts to show you the stillness, like it's kind of like the middle of a tornado. It could be swirling and cars are flying and I mean, utter chaos, a tsunami is coming, right? And you can go into the stillness with him where it's just like everything is just silent, kind of like the middle of a tornado. And he ministers to you. He ministers to your heart. It's like all of a sudden, everything becomes right. He's a God who's on the throne. You are his child coming to him in need. And it's like this, it calms your heart, it calms your mind. It like brings you back that no matter what's going on, no matter what the world's telling you, no matter how many things are coming at you, no matter how heavy things seem, it like has this instant way to remind our souls that he is there in the stillness, that he hasn't changed. And it doesn't matter. All this is not as powerful as he is. Right. Like it's not as he holds all authority. So if there's a car that flies by, he lets that car fly by. But he's going to remind you, child, I have a reason that car is flying by right now. I have a reason it's not going the way you think it should go. Like I'm in this, child. Don't forget. Right? Like I am who I say I am. I keep every promise I make. And I am the God who loves you. And I use all things, even ones that the enemy would use to destroy. What does he say? I use for your good. So trust me in what I'm allowing right now. And remember, I'm your safe place. I'm your refuge. I'm that under the shadow of his wing. I didn't used to run there, to be honest. God spent a lot of time chasing after me.
Well, that's a great segue because we usually start with your testimony,
Yeah.
and roll that into how God's using you right now in your ministry. We obviously started with prayer because that was on my mind, and it's something that I wanted to definitely talk to you about.
Yeah.
But yeah, so please share with the audience and with me, your testimony, how you got together with Jesus.
Yeah. So I remember I went up to Hume Lake. That was a special place for my family through our church. We went up there and I attended Wagon Train. And I think it was probably my second time up at Wagon Train. And I'll never forget, and I don't know, Jesus meets us all differently, but I was in the pool at Wagon Train and my counselor was sitting next to me. And somehow that was the first time where Jesus goes, all right, child, like I recognized that I was a sinner. That I had wages that needed to be paid. And I didn't fully understand, I think as much as you can understand about Jesus at that time and the cross at that time. That was probably the time I started to realize that God loves us. Like it says, for God so loved the world. I feel like there's two things in that verse he asks of us to believe, is that he loves us and loves the world, and that he sent his son and made a way to pay our debt of sin. And so that was the first time I met Jesus, I would say. And, I feel like it has been a journey. I feel like, when God said he sent a shepherd, there's something so precious about that I didn't always understand, because it is a journey, kind of like, I would say the Israelites in the desert. When we're all in captivity in Egypt. And I used to always kind of give the Israelites a hard time because they did a lot of complaining and made their own gods and did all these things, until I started studying the Old Testament and realized, oh, I am so an Israelite so many times, but I think that's the thing, we are, once Jesus meets us, right? Like he plucks us out of slavery into the desert and goes, all right, child, here we go. We're going to go on this desert journey. And all of our journey looks different. It's never the same. God knows our strengths, our weaknesses, our struggles, whatever it is. And I remember the times where he would loop me in the desert like 10 laps. And I would have to trust. And it was true. I wanted to make other gods. I wanted to go other ways. And, I don't think if it weren't for Jesus, the shepherd, literally coming and getting me so many times, that I don't want to say before I met God, but really started to understand who God was. I think we all have this idea of who God is. We all create in our human understanding who he is. And the God that I had created, I can definitely say was not the God that is. And I'm glad. I think with God, one of the things, we don't usually have a problem with his love. We don't usually have a problem with the cross and Jesus and salvation. The thing that at least my heart struggled with the most was this holiness. I didn't get it. And part of that was because I didn't understand him, But I think when I started reading the Old Testament, I saw this God who was holy, who deserved all of their praise, all of their worship, all of their adoration. He was their creator. He adored them. He loved them. He wanted to have this relationship with his people, and he wanted to them to know him intimately, to, like Jesus, was like a testimony of who God was. And, with Jesus, it was so sweet. He loved us enough to speak truth. And yet he called people on their sin because it was the sin that separated them from coming into the very presence of God. I know when I'm in the middle of my sin or whatever that looks like, there's a separation. There's definitely, I keep my distance because I know, and I think God so desires. I remember the time when I didn't think he was better than gold. We hear that all the time, And I think the thing that's sweet about the Lord and what the cross does that I found that is so powerful is that it allows us to come as we are. And, we have a God who already knows that I don't think he's better than gold, right? At that time in my life. And he wants us to start trusting him with those inner, that inner truth. Maybe other people aren't going to like to hear that, but there's a God who beckons us to trust him enough to speak it. To say to him, Lord, I don't think you're better than gold. Like, I'm chasing all these things, but that's all I know, right? Because gold is all we know. When we're born this side of heaven, all we know is what this world offers.
Yeah. And in this day and age, it's even more so than in probably ever in history that gold, is seems to rule everything now.
Well, money and power, and it feeds a place in us, our flesh, as the Lord calls it. The flesh, I've learned, has an insatiable appetite, and I think that's the deception of the enemy. And it's not like I didn't used to think nice things were good or brought some kind of fulfillment, right? Like some kind of satisfaction. I would call it like, I used to love McDonald's cheeseburgers. And I know that sounds funny, and I remember my parents used to be, why do you like those things? They're disgusting. They taste gross. They have the fake cheese. I don't even know if they're real meat. But for some reason, I would crave McDonald's cheeseburgers. And I relate it to, I didn't know until God invited me to the feast, to his feast. And I know he talks about in there where God sends out the people to go invite people to the feast, right? And they're like, oh, no, I'm busy, or oh, no, I need to go to. Well, when he started taking me to the feast and I started tasting what he had to offer, because I was busy like you, I think, like really going from A to B to C to D. I call it a Mount Everest girl. Always busy, finishing the task. But when he brought me to the stillness with him, and I started coming to the feast, and he beckons us all, he has invited us all. But when I really started tasting what he had to offer through the Spirit that was different, now I can say, it doesn't even compare. And that was nothing that I did. I couldn't necessarily tell you to get there, but all I would say is follow your shepherd.
Yeah.
Follow your shepherd. Like, I feel like our path of getting to the feast and finding the feast and partaking of the things, the bread of life that he has to offer, and the bounty that he has to offer, and the things that he has to offer. But the hard part is letting go in the place where you don't know it's better.
It's like you just have to trust. And that's the hardest thing I find to do, is just trusting, especially when he wants me to trust blindly. That is the hardest thing, I think.
Yeah.
But we need to talk about Love Leaves a Mark.
Yeah.
So tell me about Love Leaves a Mark.
So Love Leaves a Mark started in 2017. The name came from, I have a business called Truth and Words, and it was actually the tagline underneath. And that's where kind of Mark Peterson came in, and Love Inc. and that area over there, and Citadel Ministries. God's like, okay, you're going to start a nonprofit. And I'm like, I'm going to do what? Because I knew nothing. It was never a desire of my heart. I don't think, again, business, neither was business. But he's like, okay, you're going to start a nonprofit. So we had gone over to Mark Peterson. We kind of didn't really know what it was going to be about. God had kind of shared a little bit that it was going to be about connecting people and like fostering community and connection, somehow outreaching in the community. I live in Reedley, so it was going to have something to do with that. But as far as exactly what we were going to do, he hadn't shared with us yet. So it was funny. I remember going into Mark Peterson and going, okay, well, this is what we're going to do. And he goes, well, how exactly are you going to do it? I go, well, I don't know yet, but God told me to come start it, so we'll come start it. And so we start this thing, and he gave us the name Love Leaves a Mark. And the funny thing about that, I'll kind of fast forward a couple years. So Love Leaves a Mark started. The first place, it was probably about maybe 9 months after we formed it, that there's a senior living center right down the street from me. He said, okay, Andrea, today's the day. You're going to go there. And I'm like, what? He goes, yeah. And I go, well, when am I supposed to stay? And he goes, Well, just go, and I'll tell you when you get there. Like you said, following blindly. But, I think the goodness of the Lord, I feel like he had gotten me far enough with his character that I knew he would show up, So at least that. It wasn't that I wasn't scared and I felt stupid, because I think we have to get over ourselves. Many times I was willing to be used by the Lord, but I wasn't always willing to be humiliated by him. And does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense
Yeah,
to me.
so I think there's something about loving the Lord. He asks us often, are you willing to be humiliated for me, for my glory? And I don't think he always asks that of us, but I think I had to get over that in myself, to keep going to the places he was asking me. So I show up that day, and I remember saying, hi, I introduced myself, I think, and I said, my name's Andrea, and I just want to know a little bit more about your facility. So we ended up forming, she connected me with the activities director there, and then we just started doing things that the Lord put on our heart, really supporting the staff there, helping them with activities there. It wasn't a very funded place that we had gone to, and I'll never forget Crystal, the activities director there. She taught me so much about caring for seniors, and she had such a love for them, such a respect, so many things. I feel like, and I always say this with Lovely's Mark and anybody who does anything with us, like, this isn't us going out and doing it a sense of pity. No, this is us going out and obeying the Lord to show up wherever he asks us to show up. And then he's going to invite everybody else, going to ask them to show up. And then we're all just going to be there doing whatever God asks us to do. And then God's going to show up and do his thing. Like, I feel like it's not just about us going out and like, oh, these people need us. No, we all need God. Like, period. That's it. So I've had this awesome opportunity, I think, through Leaves a Mark. And then COVID hit. So once we had gotten like this a youth group that was going to come in with us, and there was about 9 of them that were going to love on the seniors and just spend time, talk. I feel like there's something so precious about conversation and connection and breaking the mundane for seniors. And then COVID hit and stopped everything. And so I still hadn't got the connection of Love Leaves a Mark, except that in my mind, Jesus, when you meet Jesus and you have an encounter with the Lord, you are changed forever. However that looks, whether you choose him or not, right? Mm-hmm. Or whether you understand what that looks like, you will be changed.
Yeah, it doesn't go away. An encounter with Jesus does not go away.
Yeah, it doesn't. So, and I'm thankful for that. At the time I ran from him, I wasn't, but I'm very thankful for that. But when COVID hit and it came to a dead silent, it was so funny. So through my business, God had taught me hand-drawn calligraphy. And then we would do cards with scripture on the back. Well, and I remember praying and crying out to the Lord, why? Like, we were just getting going with Love Leaves a Mark. We had all these people, and my heart broke because I knew the need in the senior community, and especially them being cut off even more so. It broke my heart because I'd gotten to know them, and I was like, Lord, I know you love them and I know you care about them. Like, how do we keep loving them? What does that look like? Because we're cut off. So he goes, well, Andrew, you have a piece of chalk and you have the sidewalk. You're going to go start chalking. You're going to go there and you're going to chalk words that I ask you to say to them. And so I show up with I think I went to Walmart and got a thing of Crayola chalk. And I go, all right, Lord. And I remember playing music. Music is always sweet to my heart. And God would just speak these words or a saying or something like that in front and to the side to the staff. And there was a patio out back. And then some of the residents had windows where they could look through the window. And they could see the things that I drew, the words, and some of the arts. And I have found the power of a heart. There's something about just chalking a heart. It talks about God is love. There's something in the soul that recognizes with the heart that God uses even that to speak, even no words. So, and I feel like that heart could bring out, like if it was sitting right there on the floor, it could speak to you, your heart, differently and say things differently than it would speak to my heart. But that's what I found when I went out. And as I went and God started calling us to different places, he would always speak different things. So it was really sweet. And honestly, he never even wrote God or Jesus once, which was so funny to me. But it was like these words that he's been speaking since the beginning of time, words that speak life, ones that have been written on our heart, that our soul, it actually will, when we read them or see them, it like has this spark in our soul and brings it to life, like a connection back to him, you know, and that has been such a sweet thing. So it's funny how even when we didn't know at the beginning and what Love Leaves a Mark was, we actually literally are tangibly going, and God is using art and words now in such ways that I never thought.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So thank you for coming on Radical Christianity. I can tell that you're definitely rad for Christ. You're so fired up for Jesus. It's awesome.
Well, by the grace of God, I honestly would say I don't deserve to speak his name. You know, he should have left me a long time ago. And if I can say anything now, like, God is so different than we think. And my heart would be that people would know him. That people would just that little bit, if you hear his voice today, like, don't turn away. Like, start to pursue him. He says that any of us who seek him will find him. He will honor that. Whether you've ever heard his voice, whether you know anything about him, like, it doesn't even matter where you are. Like, even ask him to come find you, you know, if you don't know how. So thanks for having me today.
Thank you for coming on the show. And we're going to have you come back sometime, and you can give us an update on what's been going on with Love Leaves a Mark.
Sounds good.
All right.
Yeah, sounds good.
Cool.
Thanks.
Housekeeping time. All right, everybody. I know this is a drag. I hate doing it, but it is important. So if you find it in your heart to help what we're doing here at Radical Christianity, we would really appreciate your support. If you can come up with $5, $10, $15, $20 and help us with that, that would be greatly appreciated. It would be a big help for the kingdom. It'd be a blessing for you. And you just go to radforchrist.com. That's RAD, the number 4, Christ.com, and find the donate link. Click that sucker, and you know, it'll take you to the Mystery Christian Media donation page. And you can just select Radical Christianity from the projects that we do at Mystery Christian Media. And that money will be dedicated to this show and this platform. If there's another one of projects that you want to check out and support, that's great. If you want to just support the general fund, all that is appreciated. And we would love it if you could help us out. And it would be, like I said, a blessing to you and to the kingdom. Anyway, thank you very much. On with the show. Ladies and gentlemen, this guest, you're going to really, really like this guy. He's got a lot to say, and it's going to be a blast. So, welcome, big, huge applause for AJ Nunez. Woo! AJ, welcome to Radical Christianity.
Thank you for having me.
Please have a seat.
Yes, sir.
AJ, thank you for coming to Radical Christianity. It's great to have you here.
It's great to be here with you, Drew. Thank you so much for the invite.
Yeah. So, Mighty Man, we just had KC on, and he said that you're taking over.
In a way, we're actually working together, so that's
Okay.
a good thing, because I told Casey, you just can't get away like that. You know, you're not just going to be dry and eye. You know, so it was definitely a great friendship there and a bond between an older generation and a younger generation. So we're believing God to do some great things with that.
Super, super cool. Yeah, so he gave us a little bit of a rundown. So if people watch that episode, then they're going to be sort of familiar with this, and it's good that you're coming on.
Yes.
So the way we kind of start things here is we have you give your testimony,
Okay.
and then we kind of like roll that into how you got into this ministry.
Well, I definitely don't want to take a lot of time than that, because, you know, sometimes testimonies can drag
Right.
out for a long time. You know, basically in a nutshell was, you know, I wasn't raised a Christian. My parents weren't even really going to church. So sort of the Hispanic culture is more connected to a Catholicism background, but it wasn't like that in my family. You know, it's just more like we did our own thing, you know. So at the age of 7, my parents divorced, and I was going back and forth between parents. And then as I got older, you know, I played sports, did stuff like that, school, but I was still missing that family unity and that family bond. So, of course, hanging around wrong people can actually lead you to the wrong direction.
Normally does.
Yeah, yeah. So with that, jumping between city to city, I never felt stability, you know. So I had one aunt who was a Christian in the whole, seemed like the whole family. And I was at the age of, just lived a rough life from the teenage years all the way to the, basically my early mid-20s. Just heathen, if that's what my testimony wants to be. I was a heathen, you know, sin, just like, you know, somebody that didn't know Christ, you know, but searching for something. I was always trying to find other things to cope with that missing element. And I found it in worldliness, darkness. My family was also dabbling with witchcraft. So idol worship, all that stuff, you know, so that was in my family bloodline. Divorce ran rampant in my whole family. All my grandparents, aunts and uncles, mom and dad, all went through that thing of divorce. So it was like a generational curse, you know, to where at the age of 25, 1996, I called my aunt, who was a Christian. I go, "You going to church?" She goes, "Yes. Do you want me to pick you up?" I said, "I don't have a ride." "Sure." I was living in Dinuba, California at the time. That's where I was born and raised. And she picks me up, and I believe Cornerstone Church didn't even own the Wilson Theater yet. It was their first trial, like rent a night to see how it would go. And I went, and my aunt went, and I sat as far as back as I can from the altar, Drew, because I was like, this is new to me. I don't want nobody to see me. I'm looking and searching for things. And
but you wanted to keep your distance, I understand. Yeah.
It was one incident prior on the west side of Fresno where I almost died. And something went bad, went wrong. They pulled out a gun on me and my 4 friends. And I thought I was going to die. And I remember crying, Drew, like a baby. The first time my friends ever seen me cry. And they were robbing us. And I said, "God, if you're real, get me out of this." That's all I said. 3 times. Well, they didn't kill us, thank God, because they did drag us from the back of the house to the alley by our feet. And I said, "Man, we're done." And they just put my head into the dirt, and what ends up happening is they took off running down the alley. I got up and I said, "I'm done with that lifestyle, you know, living a sinful lifestyle. I'm done, finished." And then that's when I called my aunt. And then she ended up inviting me there, and the preacher was preaching. Jim Franklin was the preacher. And
he's a good preacher.
One of the best in Fresno. And I remember these words that he said. He said that during the preaching, he said, "There's a young man here who's lived a life of sin for a lot of his life and should have been arrested, never got arrested, because of the hand of God that's on his life." And as soon as those words hit, felt like my heart was going to jump out of my chest. I feel this warm presence like I'm feeling right now just telling you in this studio, and not realizing it was the presence of the Holy Spirit at the time. And I start sinking in my chair, and I start melting like jelly. And he says, "In about 15 minutes, you know his voice, in about 15 minutes, we're going to have an altar call." I couldn't wait 15 minutes. I ran down all the way almost from the top of the Wilson, all the way down, and I just fell at the altar. And I was crying like a baby. because I had so much hurt with my dad and my mom, so much hurt, and all of it was leaving in an instant. And then I heard the preacher's voice say again, no man lay hands on this young man. The power of God's on him. No one touch him. Little did I know, I thought I was there for about 10, 15 minutes. I think I was there for about 40 minutes, 45 minutes.
Wow.
And they had to help me and walk me out to my aunt's car because I couldn't walk. I was totally set free from any substance abuse, pain and hurt of the past. Everything that I ever did. So I came out of a life of darkness and a heathen and crime and stuff that wasn't right, and gave my life to Christ. It was the year of 1996.
Amen.
Right there at the Wilson, right down the street from here.
Amen.
Yep. So that's a little bit of my testimony.
Fantastic.
Yes.
So how did that that moment transition into you accepting the head's position at the Mighty Men?
Well, I'm also, me and my wife, Claudia, we pastor a church called Covenant Worship Center here in Fresno.
Okay.
So we're also...
Where's that located at?
That is over off Dakota and Cedar area, off of Saginaw.
Okay.
So we just moved to that building, but 15 years already pastoring here. And then I partnered with the Mighty Men movement. I was always involved, going to their events that they would have at local churches. And then me and KC just connected. And when me and him connected, it didn't happen right away. I was just being a servant. And then KC came and dropped something off at my house. And my wife was there. And my wife shared something from her heart with me, saying, I believe it's time for, God's going to open a door for you to step into the role of the reason why you and KC are friends. And I said, really? He's like, yeah. She goes, I seen it. And it just morphed into that we were in a meeting, task force meeting, and we were planning an event here in Fresno. And the question was asked to KC, like, KC, you're getting up in your age. He goes, who are you going to pass the baton to? And he goes, he's sitting at this table right now. He goes, it's this gentleman right here, this man of God. And that same feeling that happened when I got saved came upon me again. I pushed away from the table, and I'm getting nervous as heck. And I actually got up and went to the bathroom. I go, did I hear what I just hear right now? And sure enough, I came back in, and then that's when we started talking. He goes, yeah. He goes, I believe God wants to take it to the next level. He goes, but you have such aspirations, AJ, for the next generation, and that's my heart. Is because I don't want to consider myself old, but our congregation is fairly young. I have a 13-year-old son. I'm always thinking generationally, because if it only stops with me and I can't pass it on to the next generation or even influence the next generation, then I shouldn't be in ministry, to be honest with you. So that's how it morphed into me becoming the executive director of a national movement called the Mighty Men Movement, with also the branch off of the Million Men Called to Prayer. And we got so many facets to the Mighty Men Movement. It's a phenomenal journey. So that's how it morphed into that, was us just partnering together. And I told Casey, you're not getting away. You're not going to be able to go on vacation or do things like you want. Just because you pass it on, Casey, does not necessarily mean your work's over. It's a good example to see an older generation and a younger generation doing the work of the Lord together. It's almost like I said these words. I said, you're the Abraham, I'll be the Isaac. That's what I told Casey. And ever since then, we've just been working together.
And make sure you bring the goat with you if you're going to walk you up the mountain. Just saying.
Right.
Saying.
Right.
Bring a goat along.
Genesis 12 for sure, you know what I mean? It's like Genesis 22, Abraham gets called, and then Genesis 22 where he's like now sacrificing an Isaac. Yeah, I agree with that. Yes, sir. Where's the sacrifice, Father?
The true remnant, the ones that are left when after the the Great Calling to Heaven, you know, those guys. That's always been my biggest fear, you know. Like people are like, oh, I'm afraid of going to hell. I'm afraid of this. I'm afraid of the rapture coming. Well, I'm not ready. And I'm like, you know, my biggest fear is that the rapture comes and I'm left to face, you know what I mean? Not left behind,
No.
but left to face. It's like, in a way, it's a blessing. In a way, it's, you know, an opportunity to, you know,
Endure
show,
to the end.
Yeah, but man, that will be worse than anything going on now. That'll be worse than, you know.
No, definitely. I mean, it's like, okay, are we going to make the cut? You know? But
Yeah,
I love,
are you going to be able to endure?
like,
Yeah.
what probably anchors my hope is Paul the Apostle's writings. Because the epistles, I mean, that man who killed Christians, Saul of Tarsus, and has a radical encounter with Jesus Christ on the road to Damascus, but his writings, it brings so much hope because he dealt with the things I want to do, I don't do. Things that I know to do, I don't do them.
Right.
It sounds like us, but yet he flips it and continues to say, if you can endure as a good soldier all the way to the end. Majority of his writings were from prison. That was his ministry.
Yeah. Letters to churches.
Yeah. And 40% of the Bible was written by him.
Yeah,
you know?
most of the New Testament.
Yeah. But that's what brought structure to us. The Gospels teach us the way that Jesus manifested himself, the ministry of Jesus, the born-again experience. It's the epistles that roots us and grounds us into our identity in Christ Jesus, that if we don't make the first cut, we got to endure to the end like a good soldier and be willing to lose your life for the sake of the gospel. That's radical Christianity.
Yeah.
When we look at what the disciples went through in the book of Acts, that was the start of radical Christianity. They turned the world upside down, Drew.
Yes, they did. And
Upside down.
And there's only like 2,000 like communities on earth left, and they're small, that haven't had Jesus yet. You know what I mean? That gap, when that
It's
gap
shortening.
when that gap closes, it's time. And
Yeah.
in fact, this is the thing that blows my mind, is there's actually a movement right now to find every single one of those and
Wow.
close that gap, like in the, you know, in like the next
10 years, huh? 10 or
something like
15
that. Yeah.
years?
Yeah.
There's
Yeah,
something.
we talk about that on the show. Pastor Beatty, I don't know if you know Sean Beatty.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
he was talking about that, and I believe it's something that
From
Rick,
Clovis Hills.
Yes.
Yes.
That's where I
Pastor
go
Sean.
to church.
Oh,
Yeah.
awesome.
We had him on, and
That's a great pastor.
he was talking about that is going on right now. That movement has begun to where they're trying to to where there's no nation left, even in small tribes. There's nobody who hasn't had the opportunity to hear about Jesus.
And the church better be ready.
Because when the last one is done, I might be hearing a trumpet.
Yeah, we'll be hearing the trumpet of trumpets for sure.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and then from there, it's game on. You
Yeah.
know?
Who? I mean, it's either you're going home or you're being left to fight. Yeah.
Endure all the way to the end.
And it's not going to be some fist fight or some gun battle. It's going to be hell on earth.
Yeah. As well as if we get any type of glimpse, it's going to be like when Moses had to confront the magicians and the sorcerers. Elijah had to confront the false prophets of Baal.
I'm afraid it's going to be more like Job.
Yeah, yeah, like that too. You know, so all these, well, Job is a great picture of, like you were sharing in the beginning concerning Abraham and the symbolism that's there in the Old Testament. It's, I like to say it this way for people to understand, is like even the audience, so that they can understand, like, you know, in the Old Testament, Christ is so concealed. And in the New Testament, Christ is revealed.
Mm-hmm.
So when you see the symbolism of relationship between Abraham and Isaac, it's a great picture of God the Father and His Son, the Lamb. You know, and the Lord provides. So even the book of Job, it's more to me like the suffering servant of Christ than ever before, because there's some typologies and analogies that he says of, like, even when Satan asked for him. It's a picture of when Satan was tempting Jesus, you know. So we see so many parallels of the Messiah, Christ himself, in the Old Testament, that if we're willing to look long enough and look deep enough into it, our hunger for him would start growing.
There are so many parallels,
Yeah.
and I love pointing them out. My favorite one to point out that usually throws people for a double take is the time that Moses had to make a snake and put it on a stick and lift it, and then they had to look at that to be saved from the snake bites.
Nehustin.
Yeah.
Yep.
Like that. Like,
They had to be healed.
I'm like, that is symbolism of Christ right there.
Right.
It's like totally, you know, a complete heavy duty Jewish tradition.
Yeah.
You know, a thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, okay, well, now we know why Christ was on a cross.
And a miracle takes place out of that.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
And then even Jesus refers to it. Didn't Moses lift up the serpent in the wilderness, the pole?
Right.
You know? And he says, so I will be lifted up. I mean, Jesus.
Yeah. It is just like, you can tell that the entire Bible is about Jesus. It's just that he's real subtle until the New Testament.
And bang.
And the kaboom. And then you don't know all that you have to study and read and then discuss, and then it grows on you. And it's,
Do you think that, you know, there is a big thrust? I know this is your show, but you're asking me the questions, but what are your thoughts? Do you see that there's a big thrust now of people reading the Bible or not really reading the Bible?
You know what? I think that it's kind of in a transitionary period. And I am, like, one of the people that's part of the transition is I actually spend a lot more time in the Bible now, and I get through it a lot faster now because it will read itself to me. I can use that little app.
Wow.
I push play, I hear the voice, I'm sitting there getting it, you know? And then there'll be times when I'll be sitting there reading along, right? But then, and again, this is different than just everybody, because I have spent, I'm older now. I've spent a good chunk of my life, 40 plus years, reading the Bible as a book, knowing all these different stories and all this kind of stuff. But it's different when you're having to read it in sections and try and understand it in sections. You know what I mean? You kind of absorb the words, you kind of absorb the ideas, but you don't absorb the bigger picture. When I just let it play and I'm listening to it while I'm working or whatever like that, I get the bigger pictures. They come to me. It's because you're reading the whole section. I can go through Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John in a work day.
Right.
Easily while I'm sitting there working. Like all four of those will go through. And so I get through the entire Bible a couple times a year.
Nice.
And let me just tell you, going through Kings and those judges, no, that is mentally draining. Not because it's hard reading, it's because it's so repetitive.
Yeah.
But again, bigger picture, it all comes through. And then so like I feel as though because of that latest stab of technology, where you can absorb the Bible in bigger chunks now.
Right.
Because you could not do that reading. You know what I mean? You could not sit down and read the Bible for 4 or 5 hours without it causing you some kind of like physical pain. You know what I mean? I mean, it's really hard to do. I mean, any book, it's like you read 4 or 5 hours, your eyes are hurting. You're like, you know what I mean? And you're distracted all the time. But if you can sit there and listen to the same book over and over and over again, You know what I mean?
Faith comes by hearing.
Yeah, it gets in
Hearing
there.
comes by the word.
You know what I mean? And then obviously you can sit back and go back and look at it and say, hey, what was that? And then, you know what I mean? And then it's like, oh, I heard and then discussion happens, and then you start to dive deeper, you know? But I feel as though the digital age and the apps and the Bible app has been a huge blessing, not just to me, but I think it's a blessing to a lot of people who can just sit there and listen and, you know what I mean? And if you're watching, those of you who make the app, please let us highlight a section and let it read.
Yes,
okay?
please.
Please. Because that would be great in Bible studies, because I can't pronounce half that stuff sometimes. Just saying.
No, and all the different versions they offer there is amazing.
Yes, you can sit there and just switch really easily, and yeah, it's super convenient. I still, if somebody here does ever get saved during the show, I've had people tell me that they've gotten saved during the show, but they won't give me their address. And if they do give me their address, I will send them a Bible.
Nice.
You know, but people are skittish about giving your address out to somebody over the internet. You know what I mean?
I get it.
You know,
as long as they make it to heaven.
You know, they have written me and told me that that they made the commitment that they're and they've asked a couple of questions and stuff like that. I mean, there is some engagement. You know what I mean? This show is doing God's work, but it's like, you can give me your address. It's okay.
Right.
Hey, thank you so much for coming on Radical Christianity. And you know what? And when we're going to have you on again, I mean, the Mighty Men movement is something that we definitely support here. We support men's and women's ministries, especially because those are the ones that really do the hard work.
Your pastor supports us. So when he found out, to end with that thought, was Casey introduced me to your pastor. And man, he just embraced me, gave me the biggest hug, and says, whatever you need, we're here for you as Clovis Hills. Yeah. And that was a blessing. So
yeah, Clovis Hills has a strong men's ministry too.
Yes.
Yeah.
I went over there, their prayers, I think it was like 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. I wasn't even the executive director yet, and I was going over there. I went there a couple weeks and joined their men's prayer group that was in there. And they were using the model from the Mighty Men movement there. Nice. And that brought a big smile to Casey's face when I told him I popped in over there and seen what was going on. And it just blesses my heart. That's why, a praying church is a growing church. And definitely Clovis Hills and the other churches that are fighting the good fight of faith and continuing and praying are flourishing in these times.
God has big plans for Clovis Hills, or what's now called the Hills.
Nice.
Because obviously it's not just Clovis anymore. There's Tulare County, there's Cherry Street, there's the 2 Clovis campuses, there's the one in the Bay Area, and it's just growing. And I'm proud of the church because it's that. I mean, it's a because that's like I'm a little bit more of a edgy person, and I really felt at home there. You know what I mean? And it was really hard for me to find it because the church I grew up in, which I thought was my home church, literally rejected me when I tried to come back. I mean, they were like I'm coming to them. I'm like, I have this ministry. You know what I mean? I need to get plugged back into church. God's telling me I need to do this, and I need to get connected. And no, we don't do that here. I'm like,
okay,
like really? Because, the philosophy of this church that I grew up in here, that I have blood on the concrete in this campus, because I have bled in building this church.
Right.
From the time I was a small child to, leaving high school, like starting college, like there's a big part of my whole growth in life was part on this campus at this church.
Right.
But you're trying to tell me that connecting people to God and each other is no longer what you do? It was like, that blew my mind, because that was what they used to say. That was what they did. That was whole philosophy of that church when I was growing up. There was connecting people to God and each other. Yeah. And that's, seriously, that they told me, we don't do that here anymore. Wow. We don't do that here. That's what they said. They didn't say anymore. They just said, we don't do that here.
Wow.
Yeah.
We still got to be soul winners.
That broke my heart.
I bet.
So bad. And I was just like, it's like the reverse of the prodigal son. You know what I mean? I was coming home, but it was like, get out of here. It's like,
Sure.
you know. But Clovis Hills, they were like, welcome home.
Praise
And, some of the people that were very active there, some of the pastors there, were people that I've known from when I was a child.
That's so
So
good.
a couple of the pastors that I knew well from that church were already at Clovis Hills.
Embraced
So,
you, yeah. Well, that's so good.
Yeah.
What a testimony.
Yeah, it is what it is. You know what I mean? It's a good testimony for Clovis Hills. It's not such a good testimony for the other church.
Well, I everyone's on a journey. Yeah, I say it this way. Even though I got saved through Cornerstone Church, that was my first house. And then when I left Fresno for a period of time, I went to SoCal and got connected to a smaller church, got really rooted and grounded there. And then God sends me back to Fresno to marry my wife, not even to pastor a church, not even to be part of the Mighty Men movement. Going to be married 20 years this year.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And then I started driving to Merced to go to church. So I've only had 3 really houses of my years of serving the Lord that I consider home. And the Lord told me this. He goes, just because you're not living in that old house when you were a little boy doesn't mean you burn it down. I had to use that for your growth. It's like the children of Israel leave Egypt, go into the wilderness, or they leave Egypt through the wilderness into the promised land. It's the same way.
Yeah.
In our walk with the Lord through churches. Don't burn the houses down. Because
Well, I have no intention to burn it down.
not you, but you know what I'm saying.
I know what you're saying.
So that's why I've learned that back to when I was going from house to house when I was a kid, living here, living there. I can still drive back to Danuba to see where I used to grow when I was a kid, and the house is still up.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So thank you so much for having me on this show.
And it's been a blessing. Yeah, definitely.
Yes.
And let me just say, you were rad for Christ. You're definitely fired up for Jesus, and that's what we love to see here.
Oh, this is the life. No other way.
It's the only way.
Yes.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us again for another episode of Radical Christianity. I'm so pleased you were here today. It is really important that we take the moment to reach out to those of you who feel Jesus touching your heart right now, okay? We've talked about some pretty heavy-duty stuff here, but the most important thing that we want you to know is that we are here for you. We're here to help you. We're here to help you understand what Jesus is trying to reach out to you for. So if you feel that moment where Jesus is like knocking on your heart, that is not something to be afraid of. That is something to embrace. Jesus is trying to be a part of your life. He wants to help you be something that you can be. He wants to take away your pain. He wants to take away your sorrow. He wants to give you some joy. He wants to help you become the person that you were meant to be. So if you want that, just tell him. Say, Jesus, come into my life. Make me the person that you've made me to be. And if you said that with us right now today, and you believe in your heart that Jesus is the Son of God, and you say with your mouth that he is Lord, you are saved. And if that is the case, then I want to welcome you to the family of God. And if you've done that today with us on this show, I want you to go to our website, radforchrist.com, and write me. Go to the Got Saved form and fill it out, and we will send you a Bible to tell you that we are supportive of your decision here. And it's really good to have a Bible. Everybody could use one. And also, on the website, when you're there, you can feel free to ask us a question if you have questions, or tell us a prayer request, or anything else that you have that you want to share with us. We are here to serve, and this is really important. This is the most important thing that you can learn from right now, and that's Jesus Christ loves you, and so do I. Thank you for watching another episode of Radical Christianity. We will see you next week.
And I'm not giving up, no, not me. Even if nobody else believes, I'm not going down that easily. So don't give up on me. I will hold.
It's a